Hi, Gene here with today's thought, and today we'll be talking about Gaza again. I've gotten a lot of comments on that, and there have been two interesting developments. One of them, I think, potentially serious. We'll have to see what happens. This is from Donald Trump. Well, you have to remind yourself, or you have to remember, well, I'm here to remind you. And what I'm to remind you about is this hostage deal that is, well, let's just say on shaky ground. I'm probably underestimating. But this was Trump's idea, or this was Trump's initiative when he came into office. Even before, well, he said that the Hamas and Israel, there had to be a deal or there would be hell to pay. Now, I took that to mean at the time that there would be hell to pay for Hamas, but it turned out Trump sent a representative over there, Steve Witkoff, and it looks like he meant hell to pay for both sides, and he pressured the Israelis to make what I believe is a bad deal. People are on different sides of that, both here and in Israel, but I think when you make deals to get hostages, you just increase more hostage taking. You should not let this tactic work. But anyways, Trump put pressure on Israel to agree to this deal, and well, you probably have already heard about this. It was probably big news even on the mainstream liberal stations, but he's had a complete change of heart, and I'm going to, well, I'll tell you what made him change his mind, but first let's hear from Trump himself. Here's Donald Trump explaining his new feelings, I guess, about Gaza and this Gaza deal and Hamas.
There were reports there that Hamas was going to stop releasing Israeli hostages, and what was your reaction?
I think it's terrible. Look, I looked at the hostages that came in, and they're emaciated. It looked like something out of the 1930s. It's an absolute disgrace. You take a look at that. It looks like it was a concentration camp, which essentially it was. It looks like they came out of the Holocaust. And what a sad thing. One of them was a young man, good-looking guy, a little bit heavier than perhaps he could have been, and now he looks like he's not even recognizable. Not even recognizable.
Is this ceasefire deal at risk of falling apart?
Look, I can tell you that those people have been badly hurt, both mentally and physically. I'm talking about the young women that came out also previously.
Is the ceasefire going to delay that, sir? Should the ceasefire then be off?
Well, I would say this, and I'm going to let that be because that's Israel's decision, but as far as I'm concerned, if all of the hostages aren't returned by Saturday at 12 o'clock, I think it's an appropriate time. I would say cancel it and all bets are off, and let hell break out. I'd say they ought to be returned by 12 o'clock on Saturday, and if they're not returned, all of them, not in drips and drabs, not 2 and 1 and 3 and 4 and 2. Saturday at 12 o'clock, and after that, I would say all hell is going to break out. Saturday at 12, we want them all back. I'm speaking for myself. Israel can override it. But from myself, Saturday at 12 o'clock, and if they're not here, all hell is going to break out.
As I said, well, you just heard complete change of direction. Before he was pressuring Israel to make this deal, and now he's been red-pilled, basically. He's realized what Hamas is, and the reason that he changed his mind, he referred to the hostages, the most recent 3 that were released, but it was after he saw photos like this one. That's a photo of the 3 hostages, before and after of the 3 hostages. And the top row, that's what they looked like before they were kidnapped by Hamas, and the bottom is what they look like now. As you can see, they're as Trump has said himself, they look like concentration camp Holocaust survivors on the day of a concentration camp being liberated. The way it's just, I mean, you're talking about your crimes of humanity, and don't tell me anymore about starvation in Gaza. You see these photos all the time of Gaza. I don't see any that's what starvation looks like, these hostages. And they are the ones who are being starved. Gaza they're screaming, and this international community is screaming, humanitarian aid, humanitarian aid, humanitarian aid. Just send in the trucks, 10,000 so far. And, well, you can see who's getting the aid and you can see who's not getting the aid. The hostages aren't getting it. Hamas is stealing most of the aid, and they're reselling it at high prices. They seem pretty well fed, these Hamas monsters. But you see that none of the food's getting to the hostages. And as Trump himself said, well, these, I mean, my opinion, you can pretty much write off these hostages. It's a matter of, do you want to, that was, I guess the Arabs' mistake in the War of Independence in 1948. If based on what I'm seeing today, there was a war of independence, and Israel won. All the Arabs had to do were take a couple of hostages, and Israel would have caved, and there would be no Israel, because they would do this idea of doing anything and everything to get hostages back. I just don't agree with that. And I will throw in another thing. Israel, why do they not have a death penalty? These hostages that were traded, I mean, these prisoners that were released, hundreds and hundreds of prisoners with blood on their hands who have committed murders, well, they would not be there to be released if Israel would have had a death penalty, not for common, criminals, but for terrorists who kill. I don't understand it. It makes no sense to me. And, I've said enough on that, because I want to go on to another great idea on Gaza. And actually, I had a great idea of my own, but I'm not going to take time with it today. But first of all, I have to stay on this for a moment, because as Trump said, it's up to Israel what Israel wants to do. And as I said, it looks like Israel a lot of Israelis are willing to, sacrifice anything, give up the whole war, just give up to get the hostages back. And Hamas said, what triggered this also by Trump was that there's supposed to be, 3 more released on Saturday. And Hamas said, well, Israel's not keeping their end of the deal. Maybe we're not going to release them. They're just jerking the Israelis around. And these are terrorists, and why Israel's letting themselves be led around like this and humiliated like this. It really, at some point, your country matters, and 10 million Israelis matter more than, I'm sorry to say, more than a few dozen hostages, half of whom probably are dead. And that's the other thing, what Israel is willing to do to get back dead bodies, which also makes no sense. Nothing more can be done to the dead hostages, and the bodies are there, and the Israelis would get them back eventually by invading. So that, I don't understand that logic to me either. It's a Jewish state, I'm a Jew, and I just have to be honest, I just don't understand their thinking. It makes absolutely no sense to me. But this is not universal in Israel. Somebody else had a really great idea, as good as the one Trump had, about Gaza, and I'm just going to put up the headline, and then I'll read you some quotes. And I always link to these articles, unless I forget, which I don't think I have, in the description. You can read the whole article. But here it is. I have to tell you who Bezalel Smotrich is before I put up the headline. He is the finance minister of Israel. Very hard line on Israel winning. He's a member of the Likud, that is Netanyahu's party, and the majority party. Well, they're not the majority party. There are so many parties in Israel, but it's the largest party in Israel. And like all parliamentary, or a lot of parliamentary governments, it's a lot of these parties, you have to create coalitions. I don't want to get off on that track. The point is that he was against this hostage deal. from the beginning, and he still is. And he came up with a great idea. I'll explain why it's a great idea, but here it is. Now you know who Smotrich is, and here's the headline. For every hostage harmed, Israel will take 5% of Gaza, Smotrich says. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said that Israel has full backing from U.S. President Donald Trump for a policy linking Gaza annexation to harm inflicted on Israeli hostages. Smotrich argued that Israel should cut off electricity, water, and humanitarian aid to Gaza, while warning Hamas that every hostage who is harmed would result in Israel applying sovereignty over 5% of Gaza. He reiterated, we have full backing for this policy, citing Trump's support. Smotrich suggested that Hamas be presented with a clear ultimatum. Once the war resumes, all the released terrorists, these would be the ones that are being released in exchange for these hostages, once the war resumes, all the released terrorists must be rearrested. This would take very little time, and a very simple message must be conveyed. For every hostage harmed, on that same day we will apply sovereignty over 5% of Gaza. Another hostage, another 5%. And we have full backing from President Trump on this matter. That is a great idea. It's something that Israel should have done a long time ago, because you have to keep in mind, this is why this is such a great idea. Because Hamas and, well, the Palestinian Authority too, the Palestinians, but especially Hamas, are obsessed with, they have this fantasy of destroying Israel. They want this two-state solution that hopefully now is dead. The whole idea on the Hamas side was it would take them one step closer. They would get some land and then bring them a step closer to getting all the land between the Jordan and the Mediterranean, between the river and the sea. So the way because you have Hamas, after, you can see how, as Trump said, Hamas or Gaza is basically a demolition site, but you have Hamas claiming victory because to them it's a victory because they, number one, they survived, and number two, they haven't lost any land, so they survived, and now they can try again, because these are millenarians, jihadists, religious fanatics. Their timeline is basically forever, that they just keep trying and eventually they'll conquer Israel. The only way this changes is they have to lose land. It has to, instead of going forward, they have to be pushed back with every provocation, every attack that they commit, every harm, as Smotrich said, to a hostage that Hamas perpetrates. Then you have a whole different story. Then you can make, they can make their victory speeches, and they can march around in their uniforms, which, by the way, you didn't see those uniforms when the fighting was going on. That's because you talk about violating international law, Geneva Convention, because they take off their uniforms, keep them nice and clean, and they fight in civilian clothes. So you can't tell who is a civilian and who is a combatant, which totally violates the Geneva Convention. And by the way, I have read the Geneva Convention, unlike a lot of these people who cite international law and the laws of war and all that, and it's clear to me they've never read the Geneva Convention. But another story for another day. The point is that if Hamas is celebrating their victory in a Gaza that is smaller and smaller and smaller, the people get the idea. Right now, the Middle East, outside of Gaza, they don't take them seriously, but it undermines them even more. So I think it's a great idea. Plus, Israel gets more land. They have a growing population. It gives them more land. And I actually have an idea for Gaza, a little preview of coming attractions. I keep putting it off, but it's my own original idea, and I think it's a great idea. So keep you in suspense. That's my thought for today. Thanks for stopping by. If you could subscribe, that would really be great. I'm always happy to hear your thoughts in the comments section below the video. Share this video with anyone you think would benefit from it. But most of all, come back and see me again. I would love to see all of you again. And until I do see all of you again, bye.